Sometimes the truth doesn't whisper, it roars. And when it doesn't knock politely. It tears through the silence like a storm, leaving nothing untouched. A stunned Rebecca Langford blinking in disbelief on live television. That night, millions of eyes watched as the unthinkable happened. Rebecca Langford, the unshakable voice of the Langford Report, the queen of televised spin, sat frozen, speechless, stripped of the armor she had spent a lifetime forging. In front of the entire country, her control crumbled, and all it took was one man speaking his truth. His name was Isaiah Brooks, a black entrepreneur from Indianapolis, quiet in tone but thunderous in presence. He wasn't a pundit chasing airtime. He wasn't a professor buried in theory. No, Isaiah was something far more dangerous to a lie. He was the truth, wrapped in lived experience, standing calmly at the center of a stage built to silence him. Rebecca had spent years perfecting her game. The Langford Report was her kingdom. She didn't just host the show, she choreographed it. Conflict wasn't an accident, it was her currency. She invited guests only to twist their truths, distort their words, and reinforce a narrative that comforted the masses while ignoring the marginalized. She was smug, she was sharp, and she had no idea the storm that Isaiah had brought with him. Flashback, studio lights, rise. Welcome, Isaiah, she said with that plastic smile. It's refreshing to see someone who didn't let excuses hold him back. Isaiah didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He had been in this arena before, just under different lights, different names, different faces. But the script was always the same. I appreciate the invitation, he replied coolly, looking forward to the conversation. Rebecca leaned in, ready to dance. You built your company from the ground up. No handouts, no shortcuts. Would you say that proves anyone can make it with enough hard work? Applause, trained, obedient, hollow. But Isaiah didn't play. Hard work matters, he said, voice like calm steel. But so do the obstacles in the way. The real question is, why do some of us have to climb mountains just to reach the same starting line? The room shifted. Rebecca felt it, but she smiled wider. Come on now, Isaiah. You made it. Doesn't that mean anyone can? He smiled softly, but there was no amusement in it. If one person crosses a broken bridge, it doesn't mean the bridge isn't broken. It just means they crossed despite the danger. That's when it began to unravel. Some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. A murmur building. Rebecca's smirk turned defensive. So you're saying hard work doesn't matter? Isaiah met her gaze. Hard work matters, but let's not pretend the hill is the same height for everyone. And let's not pretend that's just chance. The words weren't loud, but they echoed. She kept going, tried to regain control. But look at you. You didn't wait for help. You built something amazing. Isaiah exhaled steady. And I had to be twice as good to get half the credit. Rebecca scoffed. That sounds like an excuse. But Isaiah's voice cut through her dismissiveness like a knife. Rebecca, do you know how many boardrooms I walked into where they assumed I was the assistant, not the CEO? Do you know how many times I had to prove I belonged in rooms others were welcomed into? She straightened in her chair, still trying to keep the reins. Well, maybe that's just part of business. Isaiah leaned forward. Sure, but let's not pretend the gate opens the same way for everyone. For years, she had shaped the story, spun the angles, painted over reality with polite delusion. But not tonight. Tonight, her script was on fire. Rebecca, faltering. So what are you saying? That people are victims, powerless against the system? Isaiah didn't blink. I'm saying pretending the system doesn't exist doesn't make it go away. And then he flipped the lens. With precision, with purpose. She had accused him of benefiting from diversity quotas. He asked her, without raising his voice, "Rebecca, have you ever been in a room where you were the only white person there?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" "It's a simple question." Silence. "Have you ever been judged before you spoke? Assumed to be less? Treated as if your presence was a favor, not a right?" Rebecca looked uneasy now, no longer the polished host, but a woman on thin ice. Isaiah didn't stop. "And while we're talking about advantage, let's talk about yours." He paused. "Let it hang in the air, then drop the truth like thunder. You've spent years denying privilege exists, but your first media job came because your father was friends with the station manager." Gasp from the crowd. Camera flashes. Rebecca's lips parted. No words. "And let's be real," he said. "Would you have had that chance without the name, the face, the comfort you brought into the room? You didn't just walk in, you were welcomed in." Her jaw tightened, her grip on the chair. Betrayed her. Isaiah turned to the audience. And then came the line, the one that would echo through every corner of social media, in homes, in classrooms, in hearts. That's the thing about privilege. It's not about whether you struggled. It's about the head start you didn't even know you had. And the moment you name it, people get uncomfortable. The silence wasn't empty. It was electric. Rebecca Langford had nothing left to say. But Isaiah Brooks, he had just begun. Sometimes the storm doesn't hit all at once. Sometimes it creeps in, crack by crack, until the dam finally breaks. Rebecca Langford's face remained the perfect mask of composure. But masks, they crack under pressure, and the pressure in that studio, it was seismic. Her jaw clenched with the kind of tension that no camera filter could hide. Her back, once regal and relaxed, now sat stiff with something she couldn't disguise. Fear. And yet she laughed. Not a laugh of joy, a laugh like glass shattering in an empty room. Rebecca, sharp, cold. "So what? Now I'm the villain?" No sarcasm, no charm, just desperation, cloaked in forced amusement. Isaiah didn't blink, didn't rise, didn't revel. He simply looked at her. Isaiah, quiet, resolute. "This isn't about villains. It's about truth. And the truth is, you built your career dismissing voices like mine, while climbing ladders others never even saw." A hush fell, not the silence of boredom, but the silence that comes when a whole room forgets to breathe. Rebecca's fingers began to tap against her desk, a soft but erratic rhythm, a drumbeat of unraveling control. The audience had shifted. They weren't just watching a segment anymore. They were witnessing a reckoning. Some still clung to their comfort, but others were waking up. Rebecca strained. "Look, I'm not going to apologize for working hard. You act like I didn't earn this." Isaiah leaned back, folding his hands. Calm, measured, unbothered. "Isaiah, I never said you didn't work hard. I said your path was different. And the fact that you're this defensive tells me you already know that." For the first time in her entire career, Rebecca Langford wasn't driving the conversation. She was trying to outrun it. And then, the unexpected twist. A figure emerged off camera, a producer, pale-faced and tense, slipping her a phone. That never happened live. Not on her show. She glanced down, and the air left her lungs. Rebecca, softly under her breath. "Are you kidding me?" She turned toward the control booth in disbelief, but the moment had already fractured. The studio felt it. The world watching felt it. Isaiah? He didn't move. He had already said what needed to be said. Rebecca, strained smile. "Well, Isaiah, looks like you've made quite an impression. We're trending." Isaiah arched a brow. "Isaiah, is that so?" Rebecca, forcing composure. Seems our viewers have strong opinions, but what she didn't say, the truth she couldn't utter, was that this wasn't a trending moment. It was a rupture, and it was spreading like wildfire, not in her favor. Her downfall wasn't theatrical. It was quiet, methodical. Clips, tweets, threads, headlines. Rebecca Langford silenced on live TV. Businessman calls out. Talk show hosts hypocrisy and wins the internet. The moment the Langford report began to unravel, and behind every headline was something worse. Advertisers, watching, executives, dialing in. The brand she spent decades curating, beginning to rot from within. She turned back to Isaiah, searching his face for gloating. But there was none, just quiet resolve. Rebecca, bitter. I suppose you got what you wanted. Isaiah, steady. This was never about what I wanted, Rebecca. It was about the truth. And with those words, final, unshakable, she had nothing left to say. The cameras kept rolling, but the show was already over. Rebecca sat frozen as her crew whispered into headsets, checked their phones, flicked wary glances in her direction. Not pity, not concern, disbelief. She was no longer the host. She was the headline. Isaiah stood slowly, smoothing his blazer, nodding politely to the staff. There was no triumph in his step, just peace. He had spoken truth into a place built on performance, and that truth was echoing. A young producer approached Rebecca, nervous. You should see this, he muttered, holding out his phone. She grabbed it, scanning the screen. Clip after clip, caption after caption, every frame capturing the moment her carefully built world began to collapse. Rebecca, voice cracking. This is ridiculous. But it wasn't. It was justice, and it was public. The audience she once curated so meticulously, splitting, some loyal, others awakening, seeing not a silenced genius, but a woman cornered by the very truth she'd spent years trying to mute. And then came the gut punch. Producer, hesitant. Two of our biggest advertisers just called. They're reconsidering. Rebecca, shaking. They wouldn't. Producer, soft. They are. She stormed off the set, not in fury, but in panic, scrolling, reading, watching her empire turn to ash in real time. Isaiah? He walked out calmly, stopping briefly as a reporter caught him by the exit. Reporter. Mr. Brooks, any comment on what just happened? Isaiah paused, thoughtfully, purposefully. Isaiah. It was never about me versus her. It's about whether people are finally willing to hear the truth, even when it makes them uncomfortable. That clip hit 10 million views in less than 24 hours. And Rebecca Langford? She spent the next few days trying to outrun a truth she could no longer ignore. She posted a carefully worded statement, talked about nuance, discourse, different perspectives. But the damage was done, because the world had finally seen what her critics always knew. She didn't lose an argument. She lost her illusion. And when truth finally breaks through, no amount of spin can silence it again.